Hello everybody, it's Mike here at Games from Scratch, and did you know that Gaia was the proto-deity from Greek mythology that was basically synonymous with the Earth, gave birth to all the Titans, a very important character in Greek mythology. And to carry on the history lesson, the word Terra actually comes from the Roman name for Gaia. Well, I mention this because Gaia actually has two spellings, G-A-I-A and G-A-E-A, and frankly, they're the same thing. And on top of that, there is a landscape creation program called Gaia. It's a Unity plugin. I covered it about 4 months back. And then a couple weeks ago, about a week back, I got a couple of requests for why don't you cover Gaia? And I said, I did. No, it's brand new. It's a landscape tool. No, I did. Well, I didn't. Actually, that's kind of a mistake I made. So my apologies. This is Gaia, the same Gaia. We're talking about the same thing. Basically, Gaia means Earth, and that's what we're talking about here. It is a new tool for basically creating terrain from the ground up using either a network of nodes or a stack of nodes. We'll see exactly what this means in just a moment. Now, Gaia itself was created by Quad Spinner. We're here on their website. Of course, I will make all the links available in a link down below. But what you are most interested in is this download link right here. And here's where I lose a couple of you. It was nice talking. Hopefully you enjoyed the history lesson. Gaia is for Windows only. So if you are a Linux or Mac user, I don't know if this will run under Wine. Hopefully it will run under Wine, and one of you can let me know in the comments down below if you get it running. But this is right now a Windows product. Now, it was just released on February the 28th, so I'm about a week and a bit behind the curve. Next time, when people say something to me, maybe I'll pay a bit more attention. But it is still recently released from early access, and some of it is still actually kind of early access that we won't look at today. But what we will look at today is guaranteed to be impressive. So go ahead and download it. It's only 45 megabytes, and the most important part is the community version is completely free. They've actually got very good licensing structure here, so we'll get to a bit of this right away. First off, they're all useful for commercial use, so you can use them to make money. Your major limitations are on the free version, you are limited to 1K. Basically, the ultimate output from this is height maps, and you're going to have a 1K resolution limit on it. You're also going to have limited access to Erosion Studio, which frankly barely works right now, so I wouldn't sweat that one too much. At the indie level, you've got 99 bucks. The cool thing about that 99 bucks, again, that is a perpetual license. That is not a per year thing, so you buy it and own it. In that case, it bumps your limit up to the 4K, and you get access to the 4K directed erosion. At the professional level, at 200 bucks, you've got scripting on top of that, full access to erosion. And then at enterprise, it's mostly about floating license and automated scripting and that kind of stuff. So with the details out of the way, let us jump in and take a look at Gaia. So here is what you get when you first launch Gaia. You've got options of creating a graph, a layer, opening an existing file, quick start, or the directed scripting is all down here. Again, I'm not going to really get into that. But what we're going to show you right now is creating it using a graph. So you can either create a graph of nodes or a stack of nodes. I'll come back and show you stack later on. Graph is the more powerful, but definitely more difficult way of creating things. And here you see we are now in Gaia. And the power of it is down here. You can see we've got a network of nodes, a mountain node, a displacement node, and an erosion node. And they're generating this height map that you see up here. Now, using the middle mouse button, we can pan orbit. You can scroll in this way, and you can hold down Alt and then left mouse button to do like a track or trackball kind of rotate here. You can see the end result over here. So this is the final. As you switch through the graphs, it gets to that point in the graph. So this is with just the mountain node applied. This has a displacement effect applied on top of it, and then an erosion effect placed on top of that. You'll see for each one of these settings, you can control the settings available over here. So I could change out the random seed on the erosion, and we will get a new erosion amount as a result. Although I'm not seeing any changes. Or we could change base level in the down cutting. And again, I'm not seeing any changes. Let's go back. Here, let's do it with the mountain. You see the effects much more pronounced there. So here we're going to change out the random seed on the mountain generator. And then you see a very different mountain being generated as a result. You can change the scaling. You can change the edge. So every tool has its own set of customs here. Now, you'll notice over here, we've got some variable values like C. A, B, and I'm mouse hovering and I'm getting no details or feedback. Speaking of feedback, if you are one of the developers, this is my feedback to you. We need a little bit more tooltip explanations for what the heck this stuff does. On top of that, you also need better help integration because there is basically none. So you're going to spend a lot of time stumbling around trying to figure out how to use this guy. But it's not that hard. Now, the cool thing is we got up here, so we are now in a typical 3D preview. We can switch over here to FPS view, and then we can navigate around the view using the WASD keys in your mouse and the left mouse button, like you would with any first-person shooter. And then we'll flip back here, back to our normal 3D view. You've also got an orthographic view, and then you've got a show a 2D viewport. Now, what this is ultimately the height map that's being generated, that is generating this. So you notice here the black is level, and then the white, the level of whiteness is determining the amount of rise in the terrain. That's a pretty standard format, and almost every game engine out there is going to support height maps in some way, shape, or form. However, you can also bake this out as polygons, as we will see later on. Now, the magic of this guy is ultimately over here. So this is where you put everything together. I'm just going to go ahead, I'm going to box everything in here, and I am going to delete all of the nodes. Now, it's not going to update this guy, which is kind of weird. It doesn't actually start a new result until you start your own new graph. So let's look at that next. Now, the cool thing here is I can actually take this side view of all the different graph nodes that we've got, and you can expand it out. So depending on the resolution of your monitor or your workflow, you can size it accordingly. Unfortunately, I don't think you can undock, which I really wish you could. Now, what we can do here is bring in, so we've got primitives, just like you've got cube or polygons and spheres and so on when you're working with 3D. These are your primitives when you're working with your height map. This is kind of your starting point. So you got things here like Perlin noise or Voronoi noise. We've got plates, Voronoi, line noise, file, constant, dunes, and so on. So let's start off, and we will create a dune. So here you see we've got a dune in the world, and that is your typical sand dune. Again, we can change out the scale of it, or we could change out the random seed and get a completely different result. So there we go. We've got a sand dune. I'm content with it. So that is the starting point of our mesh. Now let's say we wanted to also have like a tremor or a fault line running through this. Well, we can do that as well. Let's bring in a fault node. And what you'll notice here is the fault node is a completely separate result. So when I select it, there is the fault it is generating. Let me just, like so. So you see we've got a fault running right through the earth line. And when we select here, we've got our dune. But what we want is the dune and the fault to kind of be combined together somehow. How are we going to do this? Oh, hey, we can come over here and we can do a combine. So drop a combine node in the world. We drop the output pin from the dune into the input 1. We drop the output pin from the fault line into the input 2. You'll see it goes from red to whatever color that is, greenish. And now you see we have a combination of the two. Now we can actually flip the percentage between the two values. So if we want to focus more on the fault and less on the dunes, we can do so. And there is your end result. We have now a giant fault line running through our dunes. And we could keep doing this. We could keep bringing in, so if we wanted to have a mountain in the world, we could bring in a mountain as well and start mixing and match them in. You can also do things now like, so we've got our world, say we're happy with the base results we've got here. We can start bringing in, say, filters. So we've got our combined result right here. Let's filter it. We're going to add some rocks to our world. So we're just going to drop that, and if you drop something directly onto a node, it will automatically pin to it. So now we have a bunch of rocks in our world, and we could jack that way up. So we have like an Earth-like, a moon-like surface, or we can jack it way down. So we got a little bit of rocks going on. And let's say I don't really like the results of said rocks. So then what I could do is come in and, for example, do I could do an erosion over time. So this will erode down the entire thing a bit. This will take away some of the peaks in your world. And there you see the end result of all of that. So at this point in time, we might be pretty content with our world. Now let's say we want to, I don't know, maybe we wanted to have a little bit of water in here. Well, we've also got that option up here. We got a few options here. We can change out the material that we're rendering with. Like here, we can change out the lighting. So we can change the point source of our light in the world. We can change the brightness, the ambientness, etc. This is actually changing a lot of those as I'm switching it around. Let's actually go back to where we were, though. It actually looks better, less light. And we've got control over the water. So we can say, yep, we want some water in our world. And then what you're essentially doing is tell it what level or what height line to bring the water at. So what we're going to do is we're going to bring it up till it slowly fills that fault line we created. So there you see. So there's the water starting to permeate into our world. And that is kind of it, to be honest. We're at the very basics of it. Now, you'll see there are a ton of different adjustments, primitives, erosions, and so on that you can go ahead and work with, and figuring out exactly what they all do, well, that's going to take a lifetime, but it's at least getting you started. And I think we've kind of, in this simple example, kind of shown you at least some of the power of Gaia at least. And now what you would generally do is pick an output node. So let's say I'm going to click the erosion here. I'll right click and say mark for export. And then what I can do is just go ahead and build this guy. The result's going to come up here. So you see we've got this erosion node is being exported. All of your different things about it. Now, the key thing is we have to say export at 1024, otherwise we are going to get a watermark. We pick which format we want our height maps to be in. I'll stick with ping. They're generally pretty small. And then you pick where you want to build it. And let's jump this guy in temp. Now, I always find that this ends up being a different process than what I expected. It always gets a little mad at me for some reason. So maybe I'm doing it wrong, but there's my build destination. I'll go ahead and start my build, and then it so then it completely ignores it. So if I got another piece of feedback, why do you have that in there if you're just going to ignore it when you hit the build button? So anyways, I'm going to go ahead and call this guy Gaia. Yeah, I'll call it Gaia, YouTube, and export. So now what it's doing is going ahead, loading up its builds forms. Now this is one of those areas where if you're building really complex ones, you can get distributed builds for the professional version, etc. But I never found the build speed to be that painful, and you don't do it too often. So it just built up dunes, fault, combine, rocks, and erosion map. Erosion is the one I ultimately care about the most. So here we go ahead, and this should be it. 318. No, where's my YouTube? Gaia YouTube. Oh, ignores the file name too. That's kind of annoying. All right, so what we ultimately get as a result, here is the texture map that you would use as a height map. And you got the other versions of it. So you've got for flow and so on. So you got various different height maps you can now use in your ultimate game, or however you're going to end up using this. But I would imagine game is the most common thing. Now, another cool thing that we can do here, let me make sure that I don't have any of the type maps open, because this actually errored out on me last time. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to close this node out. And I'm going to skip that, and I'll actually take that guy out of there. So we'll remove mark for export, and we're going to add a new node in here, and it's a mesher node. I'm going to drop that on erosion. So what this is ultimately going to do is create a polygonal mesh of our texture here. So we can go ahead and let's jack the vertex count down to like 121. Got to go the other way. All right. So we want to have a lower vertex count. And then you can say how many LODs you want it to generate. I'll get it to generate 2 LODs. And what this is going to do is build me a wavefront OBJ static mesh file. So I'll go ahead and build this out. Start the build. And then assuming we don't get an error this time. See, and I don't know what's going on here. Okay, so I'm just going to skip it at this point in time. It's a bug, I've got to assume, in Quad Spinner based off the order that I'm going in. But if I do the mesh build immediately, what we do is get an OBJ export from it. But in this case, I'm not getting that. So I don't know if I'm hooking up to the wrong node. I don't know if this is user error or them. But what this node ultimately should do is create an OBJ file that you could then load in Blender or Max or Maya or your game engine, and it is the exact mesh that is being generated here. Now, keep in mind, they're normally about 50 megabytes in size, except for the LOD version, so do be aware of that. Now, one final thing we're going to talk about here is coloring this guy. So if we want to add some texture or color to our world, we can do that, actually. We can do that based off a couple of different ways. You've got the color nodes here, so I could just say biome, drop a biome on our erosion map right here. Now, you'll notice everything disappeared. What this requires is you need to pick which one and say pin for color. And then this guy should theoretically work. Should. Didn't. Not sure if I'm making an error again here or not. That should... Let's see if I drop it to my combine pin instead. Input. Nope. All right, so instead of doing a biome, what I'm going to do is the sat map. Bring in the sat map node like so. And what this does is basically, so pin in, connect. There we go. So now what this is using is the satellite data. So it's using the mesh data from here for your height map. And if you didn't do this part, by the way, so if I didn't come in here and say pin for color, your sat map will be flat. It will have no geometry information. So that's what you're saying. You're saying use this node's output for the color data. So pin that back up, and they'll go back over here, and we're going to see the sat maps. And what this is a bunch of basically color textures based off various different heights for, various different regions around the world. So, say in Peruvian mountains, it might look like this, whereas in an arid desert, the sat maps might look like this. But you can use this to quickly texture based off of height. And you can do a whole bunch more. Like, we're not going into full detail in here. First off, because, again, I'm stumbling over some of this, as you're seeing from nodes not working. And because, frankly, they're not perfectly documented, and it gets a little bit more challenging. But you do have other tools down here, like, for example, a masking tool. So I could drop a mask tool into the world, like so, and then we can define and paint in the mask channel. And then you basically edit mask. It brings up an editor, and it allows you to see, there's the downside to branching into unknown territory. But what it allows you to do is paint off certain areas and masks that will only be used. Now, again, what you just witnessed is what I kind of wanted you to see too, though. I experienced that quite a bit when I went into certain areas or in my exploration of this guy. So do be aware, it was just released from early access, so don't be surprised if you experience a crash or two. But that does allow me to segue quickly into the next part. The cool thing is, with Gaia, we'll load up and we'll show you the other mode now. So this is create a train. By the way, there is a recovery, so we can get back what we were just working on if we so wished. But there is a create a train via layers option instead of graphs, and this could be kind of thought of as easy mode. So instead of building a graph of nodes, you're basically building a stack of nodes. So this has done the same thing the last one did. So it created a mountain, applied a displace to it, and then an erosion on top. And then this one works exactly the same. It's just there's no node network. What you're doing instead is building a stack. So if I want to apply something on top of all of this, so let's say I get rid of the mountain. I can just come up here and say delete, and then our world will have no mountain in it, and there's nothing to display. So then what I can do is come back here, and we can select our perimeter. So it's the same basic process, but as you can see, so let's do Veroni plus. So there we've got our base world. I'm going to apply that, put that back to the top, and then the display should be able to work on it. So there you see, now we're displacing it. We can erode it down, so we could erode more over time. So it's just kind of a different method of creating the same thing. It's just stack based. So this applies to this. This applies to that. Now, where you kind of fall apart is you don't have the parallelism you would have from a graph, but this is also kind of a simpler way to go. At the same time, I should be able to go the same route we did. Now, what I'm finding, though, the color options aren't here. They may be hidden somewhere else, but they're not shown right here, which is kind of a bit of a bummer. So I don't think I can apply the satellite map as an example, but we could just keep building on top, apply adjusters, so I could do... put a sign on top of this guy. No idea what that's going to end up doing, but we'll see. And then for each one you add, you do again have all the control points over it. And there you see the effect of our sign. Let's reduce that down by a whole lot. Be a little bit less aggressive in its results. Should be anyways. So regardless of the end result, you see the two different approaches to workflow with Gaia. You've got the one where you can kind of come down here and do... the graph that we saw the first time, and then we got kind of this simplified version that uses the stack, but has less power overall. You do have a couple more controls down here, but otherwise it is the same basic tool, and that's kind of it. That's basically Gaia on a whole. You're ultimately generating height maps that are going to be used for creating terrain. You do have that option to come in and kind of manually tweak and edit, so you can push and pull. It's more of a paid and premium feature, and as I mentioned earlier on, my performance running it was just appalling, so I'm not going to really bother showcasing it right now, but I have a feeling that that is the functionality that is definitely going to improve over time. It does seem to still be marked as early access, the sculpting features, and I'll showcase them at a later date in this channel. I mostly wanted to showcase Gaia itself. Kind of wish I hadn't shown it with quite all the warts you saw, but you know what? That is also a good reflection of what to expect when dealing with software, especially young and new software. But it's interesting. Gaia is definitely one to keep an eye on. I do appreciate, again, their pricing structure. I think this is quite clever. There are other tools out there, and I think what's going to really threaten Gaia the most is that this functionality is more and more commonly just built in and being expanded upon by the game engine tools themselves. Now, I know one of the things that was kind of funny is Unity had a height mapping tool in there for something like 8 years, and they only officially actually had a developer working on it as of like last year. But they are improving their height mapping tools, and Unreal Engine has height mapping tools. Unfortunately, Godot doesn't. It has some via module, but it is definitely one of those candidates that could really benefit from a height map generator like this. And there are other height map generators out there. Definitely TerraGen is the granddaddy of them all. I should probably check that out on this channel as well at some point in the future. But regardless, that is Gaia. Gaia with a GAEA. If you're interested, there is also a Unity plugin called Gaia with an I, and it's also really quite cool, to be honest. So check out my video for that. All right, so let me know what you think. Gaia, I'm sorry I'm a bit late on this one. Like I said, I got a little confused by the duplicate name and the duplicate space, but it's definitely one to check out. I think it could use a few more of these new releases with bug tips, bug fixes and such, but for the most part, it is a very impressive program with a very impressive workflow. What did you think? Are you using Gaia yourself? Or are you going to be checking it out in the future? Let me know in the comments down below. All right, talk to you all later. Goodbye.